Hey y'all, Big Tim here. Thanks for tuning in for the 9th episode of the Truth Behind the Trophy series. This one comes to you from Craig's Creek, here on the Ohio River, just down the street from the house. Yeah, it's not a surprise that I could win a tournament there. I'm a local, right? But this one was different. I had just fished the Kentucky Bass Nation tournament and practiced for 2 days prior down at Kentucky Lake. And it was in June. So, the ledge bite is on. And here I am throwing this big 10XD. So on Thursday, no big deal, not a problem. On Friday, I'm throwing this big 10XD and I feel something. Now at that time, I could always feel in my shoulder when I'm cranking. Every time I would crank, I'd feel a click, 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 click every time up in my shoulder. And in the process of throwing this 10XD, now it's not the weight because it is a heavy bait. I mean, when you're trying to cast it, you're heaving it. And that wasn't it. It was the cranking. And I've got the right reel and rod set up for this deal. I've got it on a 711 medium heavy ducket casting rod or a cranking rod with a 4.8 to 1 gear ratio reel. It's the perfect rod and reel for this bait. But the process of the cranking, you click, click, click. I guess somewhere along the line, the clicking stopped. Come to find out, I had torn the two of the tendons that hold your bicep and your shoulder. Now, I'll show you a picture, but I have my shoulder was basically black from there down to my forearm. So I fished the tournament for the Kentucky Bass Nation, and I could not crank at all. I could pitch and flip because, fortunately for me, I pitch with my left hand, and, there's not a whole lot of reeling you can do. But I could set the hook and everything else, and I was fine. I ended up fishing the tournament, and I didn't do great, but I didn't do poorly. I was right in the middle of the pack. But driving home from that tournament, it was hard. It was very difficult to drive. When you go to make a turn, you try to use your shoulders and everything, and I couldn't. So I was just using my left hand. I remember trying to make it into the subdivision here was almost an impossibility. But, even at weigh-in, down there at Kentucky Lake, you'd go to shake people's hands and everything else, and I could not raise my hand to shake. I remember I couldn't raise my hand to turn on a light switch. I was in pretty poor shape, but I'd already paid my entry fee to fish at Craig's Creek. So I had to. And I wanted to, here it is, local tournament. So I get up the next morning and the shoulder's still sore, still can't lift it, but it isn't as sore as it was, on Saturday. So I drive down to the tournament, and I'm fortunate enough that I draw out. At this time in the KBF, we don't have enough co-anglers to go around. So a lot of times guys will get to fish by themselves as a boater. This is one of those times, actually I'll say most of the time I actually do hope to get a co-angler. It makes the day go by a little better. You have somebody to talk to, everything else. Well, this particular time I drew out an old friend of mine named Scott. And he's from down around Lake Cumberland, something like that. And he normally goes as a boater, but he thought he'd come up here and maybe learn something on the river. So to have him go out with me was a real blessing because I didn't know what I was going to be able to do and not do with this shoulder. The day started out kind of slow. No, it wasn't kind of slow. It was very slow. I remember I had one bite on my baby brush hog. I'd flipped in a spot that is generally notorious for catching, decent sized Kentuckys. So when I got the bite and I set the hook, it pulled me back down. It was a big catfish, big flathead, probably about 8 or 9 pounds. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? I reel it up, was going to try to boat flip it. Scott says, no, hold on, I'll get it. So he leans over side and unhooks it for me. Thank you, Scott. So I catch a couple other little small keepers and a striper. The striper wasn't that big. I was able to boat flip him and grab him. I was able to handle that. But then I catch another catfish. This one's a blue. This one's a little bit bigger. Thank God Scott was there again to help me get that fish off the hook. So we're fishing around in this creek, and we're fishing toward the front of it, and I decide to finally go to the back. So once I get into the back, it starts warming up because it had been kind of a cool morning for May or June. You know, it was, pretty cool for the time of year. It starts heating up a little bit, and that's of course making my shoulder feel better, the heat. And by this time it hadn't turned black yet, so Scott didn't see any of that yet, but he did understand how bad I was. And there was a tiny little patch of grass. And when I say grass, I don't mean grass growing from the bottom. What I mean is somebody had cut their grass and blew it into the lake or into the creek there. And I pitched right next to it and felt a little tick, set the hook, and it was on. I thought I had another catfish. Like, here I am, the catfish king today. But no, this was a nice big bass. And it jumped, and I was like, oh my, what am I going to do? There's Scott to the rescue again. Thank God for Scott. This fish come out, and it's the biggest bass I'd ever caught on the river. 5.5 pounds. At least the biggest bass I'd ever weighed on the river. 5.5 pounds. So it's a stud. I'm thrilled to death. Got a picture. We'll show you that here in just a minute. But man, what a great time. If Scott had not been with me, I wouldn't have had a prayer of getting that fish in the boat. Let alone launching my boat, putting it back on the trailer and everything else. Scott was a godsend that day. Like we'd always been friends and been friendly. And this was a great opportunity for us to get out together and have a really good time. Now, Scott, unfortunately, didn't catch a single fish that day. He didn't even catch any shorts. I mean, we didn't get many bites. And it wasn't like I was front-ending him. You can ask him. I gave him plenty of areas, plenty of room to fish. But it was just an odd bite, There was maybe a bite every hour. It was just a strange deal. But I ended up winning that tournament. And with 9 pounds, one of the best tournaments I ever had on the river. And it was a lot of fun. Like I said, that was the biggest bass I'd ever weighed in on a tournament on the river. It might be the biggest one I've ever caught on the river. Not sure. But it's definitely the biggest one I ever weighed. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. The next episode is coming to you from Green River Lake. And it's the site of the Kentucky Bass Federation State Championship 2013. So tune in next week and we'll have that one for you. We'll see you.